back to episode 2 of Not For Everyone. I really enjoyed producing that first episode and kind of getting some of my thoughts out there. I certainly appreciate everybody that took time out to listen. I appreciate the feedback, the support, and certainly some of the conversations that were sparked from some of those segments. Something that I do get asked quite a bit when I do speak is, what has being a professional athlete taught me, and how do I implement that into everyday life? And I think that's a phenomenal question. And to be honest, there are a million lessons that I could come and speak about and spend an entire episode on, in fairness. But I thought long and hard, and I guess the five that I want to touch on today kind of probably go against some of the grains and probably are a bit uncomfortable for some people to implement and have those conversations with. But I think that there's so much value in growing and doing the things that you're most uncomfortable with. I don't think we're meant to live in our comfort zones. I think we're designed to always seek it out, and I think it's our responsibility to find something outside of that and grow into it and expand what we are comfortable with. So the first thing I want to kind of discuss is seeking out darkness in favor of the comfortable light that we are. And if we use that as the analogy going forward, I think it'll help. The darkness is always, usually it's associated directly with depression, say, but let's see it as just adversity in general. And, for me, I think watching, looking back at my life and watching my clients go through what they go through, adversity is the place where all the good actually happens, right? It doesn't happen in that moment, but the tools that you're going to need to succeed and achieve the things that you want to achieve down the road are always going to happen in the darkness. And, that stems from a few things. First, the adversity itself. It just means that the level you're at is not the level that you need to be in that moment, right? So for those of you that maybe enjoy running or don't enjoy running, I think this will be a valid example for both. Let's say that you want to run a 5K. Let's start there. And so the very first day of training, that 5K may feel a bit grueling. You may not even be able to finish it. But if you stay consistent in your training for a week, 2 weeks, a month, all of a sudden that 5K becomes easier. Now you're looking at 10K and then 20, and then you're looking at half marathons and marathons and so on and so forth. And, that darkness of those first few days where you're struggling to get through the workouts, you're struggling to hit times, to even get across the finish line. Those are the times that you have to just understand, I'm growing here. I am becoming who I need to become in order to achieve the things that I want to achieve. And I think failure is such a poorly looked on aspect of our lives, whereas we should just be seeing failures as a learning lesson and not judging people by coming up short. We should be judging people when they choose to finish their race, right? So I look back at my basketball career, and it would have been really easy to have just given up, and it would have been really easy not to progress and continue forward. And just accept this is my reality. But there's always that little voice inside of me that said, you can continue going, you can continue to progress, you can continue on if you're willing to spend time in that darkness, sitting on the bench, not playing in games, not playing well when being put into games. Like, you have so much to learn that it's now your responsibility to grow, not to achieve right away. And I think that's something that we fail to recognize. And my college coaches always used to tell me early on, your career is a marathon. It's not a sprint. I don't need you to be good for 3 games. You're going to play 120, 150 games over the course of your career. I need you to be good for 85 of those. And that's all going to be on the back end when you're ready. So something to think about, that failure is such a momentary a momentary event in our lives. It has nothing to do with the long-term implications. It certainly has nothing to do with, the finality of what we do. It may end your season, but you can always come back the next season more prepared. You know where you fell short. You know why you fell short, whether you weren't in good enough shape, you didn't make enough shots, whatever the case may be, you're going to have an opportunity to fix that. And I think we need to start looking at life more on that scale than anything. And another thing about the darkness, regardless of what we realize or not, the darkness is where we can find out just how bright our light actually is. If you walk around during the day, right, and the light on your phone clicks on, you may not notice it until, the phone's flipped over or you're going through and you see that the light is on. But if you shine the light at night, right, it illuminates the whole room. Everybody knows when the flashlight goes on. And what people fail to realize is that strength, that inner strength within you, can only come out during the darkest times. Like there's a survival instinct, an innate feature that we all have, that when life gets hard and when it feels like it's too much, we can stretch it a little bit further and a little bit further, and we can take on a little bit more, and the burden on our shoulders becomes far less to bear. We're so much stronger than what we give ourselves credit for. We are more capable. We don't always know the right tool to use. And I think, looking back on my own life, how many times that I was in a difficult situation, or, financial issues, career issues, relationship issues, the list goes on. But each and every time I found my way out of it. And I think everybody can relate to that, where it felt, I don't know how I'm going to do this. How many times have you said that to yourself and you found a way to just take one step forward and one step forward and one step forward? And in that darkness, you can't run in a sprint because you don't know where you're going, but you can take one step at a time. And you have to have the courage to say, I don't know where this may lead, but I'm going to take it one step and one further step and one further step. And before you know it, all of a sudden, you're where you need to be. And I know, looking back at my life, all that darkness that I feel like I've gone through and that I've experienced, it's only allowed me to the confidence, to the ability. It's refined a lot of my skill set, we'll call it, to present that to the rest of the world. And I think whenever it is that you go through those difficulties, that's when you realize that, okay, I was here, I went through it. Now the big question is, did I learn from it? If I learned from it, well, then it's my belief that we hold a responsibility to others who may be going through a similar thing, who don't have the answers. Because at the end of the day, it takes a village. And I think sometimes we lose sight that we're all humans and we're all looking for the way forward. And I think the biggest thing that we can do is always lend that helping hand. And you have to understand, people aren't always going to reciprocate that. And we'll touch a bit on that shortly. But I think at the end of the day, your responsibility is to yourself, to those you love, and then to the greater good. And sometimes we find, and it's easy to fall into the selfish patterns of, to ourselves and to the ones that we love that are immediately close to us. But it certainly doesn't stop there, and we do have to make the necessary impact on the long term. And the other thing that I really learned as a professional athlete is that the longer that you're willing to stay in the dark, the further you're going to get. And I think it's because, as I've touched on, you grow more, you become more adaptable to your surroundings. But I think it goes a bit deeper than that. Like, I always think about the conditioning tests that we've had to take at the professional level, and the beep test, for those of you that have run it, and it's a constant. You're just back and forth, and you got to get from end to end in time of the beep. And I think I look back at teammates and the years that I was more motivated, and you have to have a willingness to be in those dark times. Like if you want to do something worthwhile in your life, there's going to be some hard shit that you're going to have to go through. Like if you want to get to the top, you have to put yourself through hell. And there's no two ways about it. You have to be willing to do more than the next guy, because talent is only going to get you so far, especially at that level. And I think, I look back at teammates, I reflect on coaches and environments, and then like what happens throughout the course of those seasons. And every single time that I was motivated to stay in the dark place. So when you're running that conditioning test, like let's just say you have to get to level 14 or 15 or whatever it is. And okay, once you hit 14, 15, do you just stop? Do you continue? Like to me, that tells me everything about where that person is in that specific moment, right? So how much does it mean to you? Do you go until like you literally fall? I remember we had to do my first year. It's called VO2 testing. So you wear a mask. It's hooked up to a computer. It's kind of like an oxygen mask, and you run on a treadmill for the test starts at 10 minutes. So you have to run for 10 minutes, and then the test essentially starts. And every minute they bump up the level, and it gives you readings and such. And I remember one of my teammates, he was one of the first to go, and he ran until he literally fell off the treadmill. Like he didn't stop because he was so gassed. He ran until he face planted on the treadmill and fell off. And I remember sitting there being like, that's what I have to do. I have to do that until that's where I'm at. And that guy was so bought into the team dynamic, and it impacts everybody. Like I look at David Goggins, and David Goggins just essentially his message is to do the hard shit. Like that's how it goes. And David Goggins doesn't really give you the formula, doesn't talk about anything really scientific. He simply is just go. And there's so much power in that message because it inspires millions of people. Millions of people have bought his book simply off of just do hard shit. And I think it's incredible the impact and the influence one can have on so many based off of such a simple principle. And that's what it comes down to. So don't be afraid to spend some time in that dark shit, because if you spend it in the dark shit, it's like a conditioning test. You're proving your worth. You're proving that you're in shape. You're improving as a physical athlete. You're improving your mind space. All those kinds of things. I know the Kansas Jayhawks men's basketball team, they go through like a hell week essentially, where it's like 4 days of just absolutely getting killed. And then there are stories from former players in the Final Four and the national championship game saying, just remember when we went through that, we got through that. That was the hardest thing we'll have to do. We can do this as well. So conditioning your mind for those difficulties and that hard stuff really starts when everything around you does feel hard. So certainly don't lose sight of that. Now, look, the second thing that I learned about people in general is that the higher that you go and the higher you climb in whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's, the corporate ladder, if you're a musician, an artist of some sort, athletes especially, Jesus, the higher you go, the more cutthroat everything becomes. And I think, Western society and capitalistic societies, they run on greed, and there's no two ways about it. Like we've become programmed to want more all the time. And the more that we want and the more that we do, all of a sudden we become so invested in what we achieve and the status we hold. And I'm certainly a victim to that for a long time. Like being a professional athlete, for me, when people ask, what do you do for a living? I'm a professional basketball player. Like I absolutely did something for me. And, it's a big reason that I ran into the wall that I did eventually. And But nonetheless, like I am proud of what I achieved and what I was able to do with my life thus far. And I think, once you start to lose that sense of self-pride and that egoic version of who you are, because you're attaching to what you have achieved as opposed to attaching to like the core essence of who you are as a person, that's when all of our issues really arise. But you have to understand that at the bottom of every environment, every ladder that you're going to climb, those people are at the bottom not because of talent or lack of or anything like that. It's a lack of ambition, and you can't convince me otherwise on this. So that's really not a conversation that I'm willing to hold. But ambition is the number one driver of what you can achieve. Like if you believe you can do it and you have the fire in your stomach to do it, you will be shocked at how much you can actually accomplish. And there are no two ways about it. I've seen guys with tons and tons of talent not get to where they should have simply because there was little ambition. They became satisfied, and you have to have that internal hunger all the time. Now, I've also seen guys with very little talent comparative and haven't achieved, they've well overachieved, and they're playing in these big leagues. And NBL this past season, there's Jordan Crawford, point guard. Point guards usually at this level about 6'2". He's 5'6", and he looked every part of being out there, and he was an excellent piece. And Tasmania ended up winning the championship. So you certainly can't fault people that are gonna push their limits, right? And to push your limits, you have to be willing to accept that no is the answer you're going to have to give more than anything. And no is often the answer that you're going to get more than anything. And people are always going to tell you that can't work, that's not a good idea, or it can't be done. But always remember, those people are just projecting their fears onto you. And that's not a message that you need to take on board. And it's certainly not a belief system you need to adopt. I think when it comes down to it, the thing that sets people apart is those that are willing to stay true to what it is they believe in. Now, I've been lucky enough that I've been a professional athlete. I've been in professional organizations. I've consulted to professional basketball teams. Obviously, the work I do with PGA golfers and some Olympians and things of that nature, that there's no doubt in my mind, professional sport in particular is a toxic environment. But for the success and for others to thrive, that's exactly what it has to be. And let me explain why. Because you have to be willing as an athlete to do whatever it is to get a leg up on the next person. And I think there are moral standards there that need to be upheld, and it's not about, sabotaging another or anything like that. But if one athlete, so if my competition is willing to run 10 kilometers every day, I have to be willing to run 11. If they bench 10 reps, I have to do 11. If, whatever the case may be, it is my responsibility to always try to one-up them. And that competitive nature, it does cause some issues down the road. There's no doubt about it. Comparative issues, in particular, are the big thing that can be costly to an athlete. But at the end of the day, you're in a sport to be the absolute best version of yourself. Now, the problem is, and this happens at every single level of a sporting organization, players are competing with each other for both. It starts with a role, but the consequence of that role is potential production, which then is payday, which is then standing within the team. It comes with security, because being an athlete, especially on the international level, there is zero security, let me tell you.
zero security. So you need to make sure that you're trying to pay your bills. My backup's trying to pay his bills. I'm trying to take away the role of the guy that's scoring the most points, not in a selfish way, but I'm trying to become the best version of what I do out on that floor. So I think people need to understand that, yes, being an athlete is great, but you're going to constantly be in a toxic environment. Now, in saying that, it is your responsibility to be the best teammate you can. And it is also your responsibility to ensure that you can handle it, that you are equipped to walk into any team environment, and with the understanding that the person that you're competing for minutes every single day is the one that's going to try to take the food off your table. And so I think people fail to realize that as much as life in general is about taking what's yours, you have to be willing to lie down and defend what you feel that you've earned, right? So, there have been times that I've been signed to a team to replace another American, and we would have to battle it out, and, whoever the better player was, that's how it was going to go. And I've seen teammates go through it. And the interesting thing is you can see how people are really wired in those times. So the person that comes in is always going to be fresh, right? Because chances are that they've been sitting on the couch, they're motivated, they're ready to take somebody's spot and start earning a paycheck. But, the athlete that has been there, how are they going to respond? Are they going to roll over and just start looking for a new opportunity? Or are they going to say, no, this is mine, the hell with that, and I'm going to defend what's mine? And like I said, I've seen it both ways. I've seen guys just roll over and crumble and be on the next flight home, and I've seen guys come in and just take their game to a whole new level, and it lights a fire under their ass, and next thing you know, they're producing at a high rate, and things for the team will end up turning around. So at the end of the day, the choice is yours in terms of what you're going to do. So, there are interesting dynamics at the professional level as well. Every organization is built on three tiers, essentially. So you have three groups. So you have the playing group, obviously, so the players that come in. So what's the dynamic, and how do you fix that flow? And then you have the coaching staff, and the coaching staff is the bridge between the executives and the playing group. And so as a playing group, where's the trust there? Because if a player and a coach are unhappy with each other, the coach usually goes to the front office. Look, I think we need to change a player out. And next thing you know, you're fired, you're traded, you're released, whatever the case may be. And then obviously you have the front office, which is trying to do the best thing for the entire club, the organization, the season ticket holders, the sponsors, the fans, all of those kinds of things. And, their loyalty is to them. So the biggest thing that I see in sporting organizations, and there's always a lack of trust to some degree between those three. And the ones that do it best are certainly the ones that actually take time to form relationships, form bonds, have a history of handling transactional roster moves in the right manner. And it takes time, and there's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, it is as cutthroat as it comes being an athlete. And when I was in France, and so they had shifted. It was 3 or 4 players in and out of the group. We had gotten off to a slow start. They fired the coach, and next it was my head on the chopping block. And I just remember what a nightmare that was. So my contract was fully guaranteed for the year. So I was excited about that. It gives you at least 1 year level of security, and in your second year, that's not really. It's a pretty rare thing to have. So I was grateful for that. And as the season was going on, my play wasn't great. The group was very unwound, I'll call it, and we didn't really have great chemistry. There was a group of older guys, and there was a couple of French guys that were a group, and the imports were trying to figure their way, and then we had young guys, and it was very disconnected as a team. And when it was my turn to be on the chopping block, I remember the club decided. The club had made so many roster moves, they were running out of money. And what they ended up deciding was they were going to pressure the players to take less money, to renegotiate their contracts so they could pay me out and move me on my way. It was very tense. It was stressful. Everybody knew it was going on. I'm walking into practice, and, I'm basically like, I have a fuck you attitude towards the coach. I have a fuck you attitude towards management. It's just this terrible, toxic place. My mom was really sick at the time, and I had all these things going on. And basically, the team ended my contract at Christmas. And when I went back to the U.S., I had an agent who essentially stole what I was awarded for being cut. So he took that, pocketed that, and I had to sue the team. So it's a really cutthroat industry, and when your agent represents other players that team is looking to bring in, he's getting paid either way. So he doesn't give two shits about you, to be honest. And that's exactly what happened. And I was on the short end of the stick, and it ended up going to court, and we got it all sorted out like 4 or 5 years later. It took a long time, but that's the nature of the business. And if you think that you can walk into anything at a high level and somebody's not going to try to fuck you around, you got another thing coming to you. So you need to really make sure that you're on top of your stuff at all times. And then that kind of is a nice segue into the next point that I want to talk about. And my mom always used to tell me this, and when you travel the world and you experience all these different cultures, and you get to meet people and understand people at we'll call it a unique angle. I had unique experiences. I got to live in these cultures. I wasn't just visiting. I got to understand them. And you have to learn to listen to who people tell you they are. And my mom always used to tell me that. And I never really understood it until I started traveling around. And like, people are going to tell you who they are relatively quickly. They can put on this front, they can put on a facade, they can act like there's something, they can tell you everything, but just watch their actions, watch who they interact with, watch the people that they vouch for, things of that nature. Because at the end of the day, like, you can absolutely tell who somebody is. Like, they're telling you, right? So if we go back to the French example, so I had 2 teammates in particular. So as the club's going up to each of my teammates to take less money so they can buy me out, just about every teammate wouldn't agree to it. They felt like I was being scapegoated. It's also their money and they've earned it. It's not their problem. It's the club's problem. And what ended up happening was 2 of the older French guys, they agreed to give their money back. And, I told all my teammates in the locker room one day, I said, look, like, it's up to you guys what you do. I understand the position you're in. And if you feel that the pressure the club is putting on you to give back money, if you feel the need to do it, then by all means, please do it, because I'm not going to hold it against you. I understand. And so I had these 2 teammates, and they ended up giving their money back, and I never held anything against them until I got the first set of court documents where you get witness statements and things of that nature. And I had 6 or 7 from the team. My lawyer did a phenomenal job with the players union in France, and you are a professional athlete, France is definitely a country to look at, because as fucked up as this situation was, they absolutely took care of me, and I had very little to worry about, and they took care of it. So the two teammates, and I was so disappointed in this. They wrote statements basically saying that I was unprofessional. I wouldn't show up to practice on time. I was late to things. I caused problems within the group. Like, all these things that were just so categorically untrue. And it was disappointing because there were many things, many alternative routes they could have gone. They could have talked about performance. They could have, spoken about a million other things, and they chose to try to bash my name. And I remember right after that, I had a deal in Spain for quite a bit of money, actually. It would have been a pay raise, and the team really liked me, and so I told them, I was like, yeah, look, I'd love to come over, and they said they would send a contract through, and like 2 days went by, and I hadn't gotten anything. So I reached out to the agent who had been in contact, because I obviously fired my agent after that, and they basically said that, yeah, this team is like absolutely tarnishing your name in Europe, and creating all these problems. So we also sued them for that as well. It was just a bit of a nightmare, and it stems from those two guys particularly, vouching for the club. Now, I tell that story to say that all the signs were there. The one was the captain of the group, and there was a day where we had a team bonding session, and he picked me up from my apartment to drive me, and the 30-minute car ride, he just had something negative to say about almost everybody in the organization. Yeah, so-and-so can do this, but this player is good at this, but the coach didn't really have anything nice. He's a nice guy, but didn't have anything else nice to say after that. And all the signs were there, and you couldn't trust that guy. And that was somebody that at one point I had confided in, and one of my really, really good friends, who I have immense respect for. So Des Quincy Jones, Des, if you ever listen to this, shout out to you, my guy. Absolutely warned me about it from the jump, and said, this is his reputation, this is that. And, I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to hear it, because you want everything to be all good and sweet. And it absolutely was not the case with him. And I learned that lesson the hard way. And, moving forward, it's a bit difficult too as an American import, because you have to learn not to become attached to people. So like the first 6 years of my professional career, I never played for the same team twice. I was bounce around. And when you're somewhere for 6, 9, 10 months, that it's momentary and it's fleeting, and it's best not to draw or become too connected to a group. It doesn't mean you don't, befriend people and you don't connect with them, but it's so important to understand that this is a very, very short-term business that you're in. And especially if, like I said, I was cut. It was about 3.5 months in France and 4 months. So it happens quick. And as my career went on and I found a home in Australia, and I played for the same team for 3 or 4 consecutive years, and you grow attached to the guys. It's a very different situation. But when you're bouncing around as a hired gun, you learn to read people, and you learn to understand who's good and who's not. And it's despite culture, and I think that could be a big thing. So number 3 for me is you have to listen to people. Listen to who people tell you they are, because the signs will always be there, and it's your job not to overlook it. It's your job not to justify it. It's your job to just sit there and say, okay, this is who you are, and this is where I have to keep you, and that's that. And it's going to save you a lot of a headache down the road, because the authenticity of who somebody is always going to come out. So just make sure that you're listening to that, because otherwise, down the road, it's all the signs were there, and I should have listened to it. So the next progression in understanding that people are going to tell you exactly who they are is to understand that you're going to be the bad person. You're going to be painted into that picture at some point in some form or fashion. And, it kind of goes back to that original point that people are always going to love you to a certain point, and then they're going to move on from you, right? So I think The Dark Knight has one of the greatest quotes in movies, and either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And it's such a true quote. It's kind of how life works, and people are going to love you until they find a reason not to. And you can't please everybody. And that's something that it took me a long time to understand, and especially early on. And, I attribute a lot of that shift when my mother became ill and when she eventually passed away. And it was simply because I understood that life is so impermanent. Like, there is nothing that's going to last forever. And, a bad thing can happen to you this week. You can be the talk of the town, and then in 2 weeks, nobody's going to even think about it. No one's going to talk about it. So you need to understand that because of life's impermanence, it's beneficial to just live in your own integral values. And so, I've certainly developed a reputation for calling it how it is and being honest with people, and that sometimes doesn't go over well with people, and they'll project out, and they'll have things to say about you. They'll gossip about you, if they kind of emotionally explode at you. All those things are normal, but they're happening because that person is projecting shame or projecting guilt or any of those kinds of things. And like, I know in my journey, like if I look at my life, I born and raised in New Jersey. I went to school in New York. I was never really more than 2 hours from home. And then I started traveling the world, and now I live on the complete opposite side of the world. So, in my opinion, I think we expect relationships to last until the end of time, until the end of our existence. And it's simply not the case. And how many times do we keep, unhealthy relationships going far longer than we should? And it's simply because there's that fear of cutting it off, because we don't want to be the bad guy. I have very untraditional views around family and what that looks like. I think, to share my own story, when my mother was sick, we were trying to sort out the, burial arrangements or funeral arrangements, all that kind of stuff, as she was nearing the end of her life. And I was actually in Australia at the time, and I was in contact with one of my uncles, and the uncles were going back and forth, and I'm like, look, like they were in control of the deed, and we were trying to get her buried next to her father and her brother. And the audacity of people to say that, hey, look, I've been communicating with your mom almost every day. Like, we text back and forth, and she's in good spirits, and our relationship is strong, and we'll try to come to a solution. And that would have been all good and well if true, but I was on the other side of the world with my mom's phone in my backpack, because my mother had lost all touch with reality at that point. She was, couldn't be trusted with her phone. She was calling 911 for things, and it just, she wasn't fit to have a phone anymore. And to hear people talk about, my mother like that, and their sister and things of that nature, and that was disheartening. And then when my mother passed, I had offered, I knew there was financial strain, and I had offered for those that couldn't get to the funeral, or felt that it was financially inconveniencing, that hey, look, I'll pay for the plane ticket, and you guys, you should say goodbye to your daughter. You should say goodbye to your sister. and do the right thing. And those people chose not to show up. So forgive me if that's how I feel, if that, I should say, structures my foundational beliefs against family. I think you're better off aligning yourself with people who genuinely support you, have the same wants and desires and directions. And like, to me, that's family. My best friend since I was 8 years old, Trey, he just had a baby, so shout out to you, Trey. Deuce is now into the world, but I look at him and his family, and I call them my uncles, and they were instrumental in keeping me going when my mother first passed. It was weekly check-ins. It's, what are you doing? How are you doing? What's going on? Just talking me through it. They were great about just telling me to continue on and, to talk about whatever I was feeling, and they were there for it. And I'll always be forever grateful for them. I still hear from them regularly. To me, your family is who you choose. Like, I think we come to this life, and you have to find your people. You have to find your tribe, and you have to find the people that are going to help push you towards the things that you want. And that very well could be your family members. But I think sometimes we are too quick to attach ourselves to individuals simply because there's blood relation. And, you can think of many toxic relationships that certainly would certainly warrant walking away from. And I always phrase it to people, well, look, if this was, a basketball coach, if this was a teacher, if this was a work colleague, would you be putting up with this? And if the answer is no, I don't see why you would put up with it just because they're family. I think that's a social construct that we've run a little bit too far with. And, in fear of projecting my own thoughts too heavily into this, I still think that sometimes you have to be the bad guy to be the good guy for yourself. And, you hear about a lot of people who speak out about, self-healing and self-love and the inner child. And, people who are into yoga are going to be very, very well versed in that. But I think you always owe it to who you were in the past to show them that you have the ability to protect, and you've grown and you've learned from everything that you've dealt with. And then as a result, that's how you begin to heal. You can never do anything about the past. You can never do anything about the future. You can only control the here and now. And every decision that you make is going to either fix what happened in the past, it's going to help heal that, or you're just going to continue to, in a recurring cycle, and the same things are going to happen. So for me, I certainly think that it's important to continue fighting forward. And if that means you have to be the bad guy to do what's best for you, certainly take that opportunity, because at the end of the day, you're walking this journey and nobody else is. And, if you really want to get to the places you want to get to, you're going to have to make some hard decisions, and it's not going to be for everybody. It's not, you're going to be the bad guy. You're going to rub people the wrong way. All these kinds of things are going to happen, and that's perfectly fine. But it's important that we also understand you have to put yourself first so you can build up your house, so then you can help build the houses of those around you. And the last thing, and I think this is grossly underestimated at times. I think people need to understand that you can't control what happens in life. And we're always going to want to control everything. It's part of our survival mechanism. It's, hey, I need to control this because, it'll keep me safe. That's essentially what's going on, right? And predictability is safe to us. And I think that unpredictability of life is what makes it so special. And I think looking at my own life, and when I reflect back, when my mother died, that's the catalyst for everything that completely changed my life. You know, I had all my experiences leading up to that. I'm very grateful for everything, but at the end of the day, that was the catalyst for everything that I've talked about prior to this. I always look back at that, we'll call it 2-year period, and how much I evolved and changed. And there was an ugly period of who I was during that time, but there's also like a beautiful evolution that comes after it and to the person that I am today. And so, you know, I think when you try to control life, like you can't predict what's going to happen. You can say, this is where I want to get to, and this is how I want to get there, but you can't say that that's going to happen. And I think the greatest analogy that I've heard or been told, it was, let's say I wanted to get from this, where I'm living currently, Sunshine Coast, Australia, and I wanted to get to New York City. Well, how would I do that, right? Like if I was driving from, if there was a proverbial road, right, a road from here to New York City, would I just start driving? No, of course not. I would pull out my phone and I pick out the GPS, right? And along the GPS, it's going to explain how to get there. And okay, well, now I get to New York City, but where in New York City do I go? You know, Upper East Side, or whatever the case may be, right? Let's say it's Times Square. Okay, cool. Let's go to Times Square. Okay, but where in Times Square? Okay, get the address and you can pinpoint. But along the way, there are going to be detours. There are going to be roadblocks. There's going to be quicker ways to get there. There's going to be more scenic routes to get there. My point being is that every time we try to control it, 2 things happen. When we try to control every situation in our life, first, our mental health goes to shit, because the fact of the matter is there's only so much you can control. You can control how you choose, and you can control how you choose to respond, right? So what you choose and how you respond to it. So things aren't always going to go your way. We know that. And so it's your responsibility to continue to move forward, right? But I think more importantly, and this is what I'd rather touch on, is we lose sight of all the opportunities that are around us. And I'll use my own college career here. So in college, I was so focused on becoming a professional athlete. It's the only thing that I thought about. And so as time was going on and I really wanted it, and I was so locked in, I didn't want to go to class. I didn't want extra activities. I didn't want to network. I didn't take full advantage of being at a state university in New York. And it was, okay, this is all I want, and this is what I got to do to get there. And, you know, I've never really been an overly social person. It's never been my thing to want to be overly social, but I wasn't upset about missing out on social aspects. I was more disappointed in the networking and building relationships with people in a more long-term vision. So looking at everything and what it is and how it is, I just, that's one thing I've tried to be better at, was to connect with people later in my career. And then, you know, obviously now that I'm running my own business and as a speaker, all these things, like, connections are everything. Your network is everything. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You can have minimal talent, minimal success, but if you know the right people and you have the right relationships, it can completely change the trajectory of things. So, I mean, I look at my life. If that time in Stony Brook, at Stony Brook University, you would have told me, you know, in 15 years, 10 years, 12 years, you're going to be living in Australia. You're going to, you know, wake up and you're going to have a view of the beach. You're going to walk to the sand every day, or whatever the case is. I could have told you there's no shot, right? But it's how everything works in our lives has led us to this very moment. It's led to me speaking into this podcast. It's, you know, led you to listening to this, watching this clip on social media, wherever the case may be. But every decision we make has an accountability and a responsibility. And I just think that we need to allow ourselves to flow through life a little bit better, because you can be you have such tunnel vision and so focused on the goal that you're trying to achieve that you're missing the thing just to the left and just to the right that could completely open up your life, completely change what you want. You can miss out on a purposeful and fulfilling experience. You can miss out on so many things simply because you're too busy and locked in to the one thing that you think you want, especially when it doesn't fulfill you. I think I look back at my career, and, basketball was such a chore and such a grind for me for so many years, because it was built on perfectionism. It was built on the what ifs. It was built on the anxiety of, am I going to get to where I want to get to? And whether I got to those things or whether I didn't hasn't changed anything. Like my goals, the way I wake up in the morning, you certainly learn a lot about yourself along the way, but the end achievement is never the thing that's most important. And it takes an entire professional career to realize that. But at the end of the day, who you are is always what's going to fulfill you. Like, are you the best version of yourself? Do you have good habits? Are you disciplined? Are you honest? Are you loyal? Do you work hard? Do you give your effort? Are you putting yourself out there regardless of whether it's a quote unquote success or failure? Do you chase the things that you want? Do you wake up to a job that you hate, but you know that it's giving you the financial freedom to support the people you love, to do the things that you want? Like, everybody's life, everybody's value system looks different. And I will never, ever, knock anybody who's trying to better themselves, because it all looks different for us. We're all on different journeys, but what I feel as though people really need to understand is that life is just meant to be lived. You can't control it. You're not going to make everybody happy. It's your responsibility to make sure that you're running this race for you and you're writing the story how you want it to be written. So on that note, I just think it's incredibly important that everything we do is a step forward. Even if it doesn't feel like it, as long as you're moving, slow progress, small progress is better than no progress. And look, those are the 5 things that I think I've taken from my career that have really helped me adjust well to life after sport, have helped me build a business. It's helped me build a speaking business. All those kinds of things. Seek out the darkness, because that's where your light is going to shine brightest. You can't be afraid of the competition of the dog-eat-dog world, because the higher you go, the worse it's going to get. Always listen to who people tell you they are. Don't be afraid to be the bad person. And you can't predict and you can't control how life is. So you might as well just live it, because you just never know where you're going to land.